Hello, everyone, and welcome to OHSC Interviews. I'm Vasu Bardwaj, and I'm your host for today's episode. Today, I'm happy to have with me the MP for Barrie-Innisfil and the chair to the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics, John Brassard.
How are you
John,
doing?
how are you?
Good, very good, thanks.
So, how excited are you to be here on OHSC Interviews?
Well, I'm always excited when I get to speak to young Canadians, relay my experiences in politics, and answer any questions that you might have about the issues of the day, those issues that you're hearing not just on the media, but might be important to you as well. So it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
For sure, for sure. So we usually start off the interview by asking all the interviewees how they got started into politics and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm John Brassard. I'm the chair of the Ethics Committee, Privacy and Information, as you mentioned. Before that, I was the opposition House leader under our interim leader, Candace Bergen. Been involved both municipally and federally now for 16 and a half years, 9 years as city councillor and 7.5 years as a member of parliament. I spent 30 and a half years as a firefighter with the town of Markham. Within that time, I was active and involved in the union movement, eventually becoming the president of the Firefighters Association. And throughout that time, I was lobbying at all levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal. And that's where my interest in politics really started. And Frank Scarpitti, who was the deputy mayor at the time, is now the mayor of the town of Markham. He suggested that I get involved in municipal politics. So I did. My wife and I moved up to Barrie, absolutely loved it. Decided to run for council in 2006. I won, got reelected in 2010, reelected in 2014, and then in 2015, when Patrick Brown became the leader of the Conservative Party of Ontario, that's when I decided to leap in federally. Never in a million years would I have ever thought that I was going to be a federal MP, but I guess it's a good lesson for all of us, including your viewers, and that is when the door of opportunity opens, don't be afraid to leap through and take that opportunity. And so I've loved every minute of being a member of parliament, and it's been a great journey, both being municipal and federal, representing my community that I love.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's great to hear. You never know what kind of opportunities can open up in the future, right? Anything can really happen. So I want to ask a little bit of a follow-up question to that. What was your favorite experience or favorite unique thing in municipal versus federal politics?
Well, municipal, you're on the ground, you know, dealing with a lot of local issues, right? Because municipal, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for municipal politicians because you really are on the front lines, dealing with issues, anything related to garbage, to policing, and other things. So I really enjoyed that experience. And then federally, obviously, the breadth of the information, the breadth of knowledge is more expanded. You're dealing not just with domestic issues here in Canada, but international issues, global issues that you have to be aware of. So that's really the big difference, just the breadth and the required knowledge of all of those issues. And that's why it's important for me as a member of parliament to surround myself with people, my staff particularly, who share that passion of learning and understanding about the breadth and depth of those issues that you need to understand as a member of parliament. Of course, you're dealing with lots of pieces of legislation. Oftentimes, as a member of parliament, you receive briefings and that's not just that doesn't just come from the government, but comes from the party and comes from your own staff. So understanding all of that information is really what is the big difference. I can tell you from my experience, Vasu, that what's important is that you stay connected to your community. Even as a municipal councillor, I would return people's phone calls, return their emails, stand at the end of their driveways, or sometimes sit at their kitchen table. And it was a valuable learning ground for me as a federal politician because I still employ those tactics as a federal MP. I return people's phone calls. Oftentimes they're shocked that I call them, but it's just a practice that I've continued as the member of parliament. I've even sat at people's kitchen tables and talked to them about the issues. So maintaining that connection to community is really critical. It doesn't matter whether you're municipal, federal. It's important that you're connected to your community.
For sure. And I just want to say one thing. You said with being a member of parliament, you both have domestic and international issues, but we all know with the Trudeau government, we have a whole lot of domestic issues itself. So,
Yeah. Yeah, well, we there's a lot of things that are going on right now, not the least of which is the inflation and the affordability crisis. I'm hearing from a lot of people within my community just how difficult things have become, prices of groceries, heating your home. There's the interest rate increases are affecting home ownership and the affordability of home ownership. I heard a story yesterday. I had somebody on the phone. Their mortgage payments, for example, have gone up $1,500 a month because they had a variable rate mortgage. This was after the Prime Minister had assured people and the Finance Minister had assured people as we were going through COVID that we were in a period of low interest rates. And those interest rates have increased 8 times over the last year, and it's having a significant impact on the affordability that people are facing and dealing with right now. So there's a tremendous amount of domestic issues, a lot of anxiety in our communities right across this country. Young people, are wondering how they're going to afford a home. And they feel like they've been lied to and let down by this prime minister. He came in 2015 with great words. He had his hand over his heart everywhere he spoke. But we're seeing a country after 8 years of Justin Trudeau that is failing in many, many areas, not the least of which is making people's lives a little bit better because they're not feeling it right now.
for sure. And I want to now transition into our question and answer segment,
Sure.
where we're going to ask you questions which are asked by the members of our high school team. The first
Wonderful.
one comes from Teppitak, and he's from Windsor-West. And he wants to ask you, how are conservatives responding to the indoctrination and culture wars? And I want to be very specific that the context is about things like cancel culture or wokeness and things like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because we are seeing that happen a lot. And we see it in political realms as well, where, somebody will post something and next thing you know, it offends a certain person or a certain group. And they're calling for their resignation. We've seen individuals that have been canceled as a result of that. Look, I'm a firm believer in the truth, telling people what is actually going on as opposed to trying to come up with some sort of political spin. I think the best way to deal with it is by telling the truth, and if you don't like that, that's too bad. That's my opinion. I saw a response recently from a politician where they were trying to, the media was trying to move somebody in a direction that they wanted to go. And the politician said, look, you know what, this is my answer to your question. I'm not going to go in the direction that you want me to go. If you don't like my answer to your question, that's too bad because it's my answer to your question. And so I think the way we deal with that is tell people the truth. And we're at a point right now where there's been a lot of, I don't even like to use the term misinformation, but, people are really hungry for the truth because there's a lot of information that's out there that's available online. We hear the prime minister saying something. Just tell people the truth. And I think that's how you deal with it. I pulled out an interesting quote. I actually have it on my desk here, and it says, even if you are a minority of one, the truth is the truth. And that was Mahatma Gandhi that said that. So, this is how you deal with cancel culture and woke culture. And if people don't like the truth, well, that's too bad. But it is, you can't separate the truth from fact. It is what it is.
For sure. And just to say, if the Trudeau government started speaking the truth, I can bet you they'd be voted out the day after.
I'll leave your opinion at that. But that's
So,
okay. Thank you. All
so
right.
I want to talk a little bit about your role on the standing committee on access to information, privacy, and ethics.
Mm.
So Vincent from Oakville-North Burlington wants to ask you, as the chair to the standing committee on access to information, privacy, and ethics, do you believe members should immediately resign after found breaking the ethics rules?
100%. 100% they should. And that same standard I would hold for myself. Look, we have an obligation as members of parliament to be accountable and transparent. Every single one of us, when we get elected, Vasu, have a meeting with somebody within the ethics department. We have people who are assigned to us as coordinators. And it's an opportunity for us as members of parliament, if we think that we're doing something that we shouldn't be doing, or have a question about some breach of the act or the code for members, we can actually proactively run that through our coordinator within the ethics commissioner's office, right? And I've done that several times where I've said, look, I'm this is happening. I need your opinion as to whether I can do this or not. Every single member of parliament goes through that process when they were first elected. And when particularly members of the government or ministers of the crown break the ethics laws, and of course, we've seen examples of that happen over the last 8 years of this government. We've had the prime minister have been found guilty of breaking ethics laws. More recently, Mary Ng giving a contract to her friend, and the ethics commissioner came back and said that she broke the ethics laws. There's no question in my mind that if you're going to act with honor and integrity in government or even in opposition, that you should be held to a higher standard and a higher count because those laws are there for a reason. And so 100%, I agree with that assessment that, you should, if you're found guilty of breaking ethics, first of all, you should never be found guilty because, as I said, you can proactively find out through the ethics commissioner's office. But if you are found guilty, look, historically in this country, ministers of the crown have resigned for much less than the issues that we've seen over the last 8 years with the Trudeau Liberals. And so we have to be held to a higher account and a higher standard. And if somebody breaks the ethics laws, they should do the honorable thing, and that's to resign.
For sure. And it's a continuous pattern of, I would say, describe it as entitlement with the Trudeau government, that they feel that they can continuously get away with this, right? Because it's not just a one scenario, a one-time thing. It has happened multiple times, an astounding amount of times over the past 7 years. And it's quite frankly, it's no surprise. And just to add to that, if the Conservatives were caught even doing a sliver of what the Liberals were doing, they would be under scrutiny under the media. I mean, ethics and politics and government shouldn't be a choice. It's a responsibility, right? It's the moral fiber that holds society together and basically is the foundation of democracy, right? It holds the people in government to account. And without that, well, they can do whatever they want, right? So
well, and when you've got a leader that has broken ethics laws several times, what sort of signal or message does that send to your ministers or anyone else, right? That it's okay, and it's not okay because Canadians still value legitimacy. They still value the rule of law. They value the fact that we are going to conduct ourselves, in my view anyways, they should value the fact that if we're going to conduct ourselves in a manner that breaks the laws of the land, that we should be held to a greater standard and a greater account. You mentioned the media before, and, one of the things that to me has become I've become shocked in my 7.5 years as a member of parliament is that Canada is seemingly the only Western democracy in the world where the opposition party, the Conservative opposition party, is held to a greater standard and a greater account than the governing party. You don't see the type of scrutiny that is laid upon the leader of the opposition, as we saw with Andrew Scheer, Aaron O'Toole, and now with Pierre Poilievre. You don't see that level of scrutiny and accountability by the media in any other Western democracy except here in Canada. And it's shocking to me that that the government isn't held to a greater account than what it should be by the
Yeah.
media.
I mean, I'll say this: the media is afraid of Pierre Poilievre. The momentum he's created, the support he's created, how he's united the Conservative Party and brought more than ever Canadians to the Conservative Party. I'd say the media is afraid of him, right? Because he has a pretty good chance of taking over Trudeau's regime and taking over his government from the past 7 years and turning Canada around, right? So I'd say the media is afraid.
I think Pierre's done a great job, not just bringing together Canadians. He certainly has brought together our caucus, and I can tell you, coming out of a very difficult period, almost a year ago, over a year ago at this time, when we changed leaders and we went to our interim leader, Candice Bergen, or as she likes to say, leader on an interim basis. We saw a caucus that really came together. And what Pierre inherited was a caucus that was working extremely well as a family. And I'll give Pierre full credit. He obviously recognized that. And everything he's doing now is to ensure not just that we're united and focused as a caucus at the task at hand, and that is to change the government, but he's really reaching out broadly to Canadians with a message of turning Justin Trudeau's hurt into hope. That hurt that we're now feeling, and I mentioned earlier, as Canadians, we're really focused on turning that into hope. And every single member of caucus is focused, disciplined, and rowing in the same direction to achieve that goal. Look, when I describe Justin Trudeau and I describe the Liberal Party, this is a government and a prime minister that cannot be redeemed at this point. They can only be replaced. And so our job as an opposition, and Pierre's job as the leader, and he's becoming very, very effective at doing this, is to provide that alternative to Canadians, to show not just that we're a government in waiting, but that we are going to turn that hurt into hope.
For sure. So I want to move on to our third question. And this is also asked by Vincent in Oakville-North Burlington. And
Okay.
he wants to ask you, what do you believe the effects of Bill C-11 is?
I think it's going to drastically change the type of content that Canadians are capable of viewing online. It's I know what the government's talking about. They're saying that it's meant to level the playing field for a culture, to expand on Canadian culture. There's two things that are really problematic with the bill. Number one, it gives a lot of power to the bureaucrats, to what people can see online and what they can post online as well. And it's going to affect the algorithms of what people are able to see, with an emphasis on Canadian content. And that's problematic for a lot of Canadians, because this user-generated content, if it's put in the hands of the government and people are not able to see what's being produced, whether it's something that comes from the United States or any other country, then it is a form, in my view, of censorship, Vasu. And I don't think, look, we have regulations, we have legislation that protects people against certain things that are posted online. But if it's a matter of affecting the creativity of individuals and their exposure online, because that content perhaps is not approved by a government bureaucracy, or in effect the government itself, then it becomes extremely problematic. And we're seeing Canadians, who are now starting to realize the impact that C-11 is going to have on their ability to see and post what they want online. And so it's going to cause, obviously C-11 has been approved by the Senate. There were certain amendments that were put into the legislation. It has to come back to Parliament. It hasn't yet. Not sure when it's going to, but when it does, it'll be interesting to see whether the government actually takes into account some of these amendments that were proposed by the Senate, or better yet, listen to those Canadians who are speaking out against this legislation. Many of them, like for example, Margaret Atwood, who you would not think as a typical conservative supporter, she has spoken out against C11 because of the censorship aspect of this bill, that it will promote and not allow Canadians to see what they want online or post what they want online. It gives a tremendous amount of power to the government. And, if look, my position on this our party's position is that this bill has to be scrapped altogether. Amendments notwithstanding, this really has to go back to the drawing board. It's a bad piece of legislation, and it'll affect, fundamentally the type of user-generated content that's posted online, and worse yet, it'll really impact what people can see online. I don't think it's up to the government to determine what you should see and what you can post online.
100%, 100%. I mean, if they can control what you see online, they can control the narratives. They can control how the public perceives their government, right? And that's unfair. How can you call yourself a free nation if you're limiting what can be actually put online, right? The internet.
You bring up a great point, because if the government's controlling what you see online, then they're more apt to control what they want you to see online. And if it benefits them or promotes them, and that's not the way it should be, not in a free society. And I agree with you 100%.
For sure. So I want to move on to our fourth and final question. This comes from Hayden in York-Simcoe, and he wants to ask you, as a previous Barrie Town Councillor, what is your insight and opinion on Ontario's Bill 23?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Bill 23. Look, it's a good question, Hayden. I try to stay in my lane as a federal member of parliament. As you know, Vaz, we talked about this. I have a lot of things to worry about federally as it relates to legislation, regulation, domestic and international issues. So I haven't really looked into Bill 23. Just remind me again, that's the building homes, correct? Yeah. Okay, so look, I'm a Central Ontario. I was going to say York-Simcoe MP. That's Scotty Davidson, but I'm a Central Ontario MP. Obviously, I'm concerned about the health and sustainability of Lake Simcoe, making sure our naturalized areas are protected. But I think it speaks broadly, and I've had lots of conversations with realtors, both Canadian and provincially. The need for housing is incredible around here, not just around here, but right across the country. We're seeing housing affordability and attainability being priced out. A lot of people being priced out of the market. So we need to build housing stock. As a former city councillor, I believe in smart growth, obviously building up as opposed to out. And the city of Barrie, for example, is doing a great job building within its existing built boundary, building around transit corridors, all of the things that I would consider to be smart growth. Town of Innisfil is doing the same thing. They've got a master plan now, the Orbit plan, where a lot of concentrated development is going to happen around transit corridors. So that's going to increase the housing stock in our area. But at the same time, I would say for me, a major concern is ensuring the health and sustainability of Lake Simcoe. It's something that I'm not just passionate about, but I know that many of my conservative colleagues who surround the Lake Simcoe watershed is extremely important to this area, both from a recreation and an economic standpoint. So we have to, in everything we do, we have to make sure that we protect Lake Simcoe. But I'll leave those issues to the provincial government. I try to focus and stay in my lane federally because I have a lot to do. But I've heard from a few people about Bill 23 and their concern about it. But I also hear on the other side of that, the need for development to occur, and so that we can have housing that is affordable and attainable for many people, not the least of which are young people who are feeling despondent right now that they're not going to be able to get into the housing market. And so we have to create a mix of that housing stock, and good planning is a part of that.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree with you more that there is both the pros of it and the cons of it. There's always two sides to an argument, but by only hearing those two sides, we can get a deeper understanding of how it affects certain groups and what can we do to go further and improve it. So to
Yeah,
move on.
I'm a big fan of communication precluding confrontation. Having discussions about it, making sure that both sides are understood. You're not always going to agree, but we've seen a societal discourse where disagreement turns into name calling and stuff. We have to understand that we're going to agree to disagree on a lot of issues. We have to have those conversations, but we need to do it respectfully as well and understand and appreciate each other's views and opinions on a matter.
Couldn't agree with you more. So we are going to move on to our final segment of today's interview, and it's called Advice for the Next Generation, where we will be talking about youth involvement in politics and more. So I want to ask you, what should young high school conservatives do in order to get more politically active, and what is one piece of advice you'd like to give them?
Well, the piece of advice that I would give them is to get involved at the local level. Make sure that you're reaching out every political party, and I'm not just speaking about conservatives at this point, because I meet with young people regularly, and I talk to them about the political process and how important it is to be involved and understand the impact that all levels of government have on your life: municipal, provincial, federal. The best thing that a young person can do, Vasu, is to get involved and get engaged at the political process. I've got it just handed to me yesterday an email that came in from a young lady locally who went to Ottawa. She's in grade 8, and she sent me her resume because she was so moved by her experience in Ottawa and going to the Parliament buildings that she wants to volunteer for me. Right. And so I've got to give her a call, which I'm going to do. But don't be afraid to reach out to your local member of parliament and say, look, I'm interested in politics. I want to get involved. I want to learn more. I want to help out. Your member of parliament will be glad to speak to you. Don't think, or don't hold them up on such a high pedestal that you can't communicate with them. Communicate with your members of parliament. They'll put you in touch, as I will with this young lady. I'll put her in touch with my local EDA, my Electoral District Association, so that she can find a way to become involved. I may even have her come into my office and maybe sit down with her for about an hour, talk to her about what I do as a member of parliament. So there's lots of ways that people can get involved. Just take that first step, reach out to somebody. If not your MP, then find your local Electoral District Association. You can find them online. You can Google them. Find out who the president is, or in some cases, there's recruitment people, attraction people that are working to find members of our association. But don't just, again, you don't have to do that just for conservative. You can do that Liberal, NDP, whatever the case is, because politics has such a profound impact on everything and every aspect of your life that you need to not just understand it, but also be engaged in it. And the second thing I would say, finally, is learn French. Learn French, because we live in a bilingual country. The doors of opportunity will open up to you greatly if you can understand a second language, our official second language. And not second language, I got to be careful with that, but one of our 2 official languages, English and French. The doors of opportunity will open up to you greatly, not just here at home, but around the world. And so when I speak to high school students, and I speak regularly in classes, I tell every one of them, don't take it for granted, those French classes that you have. actually learn from them and make sure that you understand and apply French, because it's that critical. I'm fortunate because I was born in Montreal. I went to French immersion when I was younger, half-day French immersion. My last name is Brassard in French. My dad is Jean-Guy. I have all kinds of family that still live in Montreal. I lost a lot of my French, but I've been able to pick a lot of it up since I've been to Ottawa, and it's been extremely helpful in my role as a member of parliament. But for young people, it'll open up a world of opportunities to learn French.
For sure. So I want to thank you for your time today, and I really appreciate you being here with us. We wish you well in the future. And once again, thank you for joining us today for OHSC interviews.
My pleasure, anytime. And look, I really appreciate you taking the time as well to interview. I know I'm not the only member of parliament that you've interviewed, but I think these types of things are important to engage young people in the political process, as I said, and I really appreciate you taking the time and reaching out and asking me to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you.